Howdy, folks. Mitch Kuffa back with you. I'm here to talk to you about life expectancies. Last time I was with you, we talked about the exterior life expectancies of roofing and gutters and siding and windows and all that kind of stuff. And today I want to talk to you about interior life expectancies. So get a pencil, get a pencil and paper out and just jot these things down because it's important. It tells you when you're going to be ready to replace certain things and when you should be looking at certain things. Okay. I did a lot of research on this, so it's really interesting, in my opinion, okay? Life expectancy. What we're going to do here is there's going to be no special order to this. It's just random interior and exterior items because there's really no order to it. So it was just things that I came up with in my vivid imagination of things that we should be concerned about. How long does a interior paint job last in a house? Okay? How long does an interior paint job typically last in a house? Okay? Well, guess what? The pros say 5 to 10 years. 5 to 10 years. And it kind of depends on, the application and how professional it was. The problem with painting in so many cases is that homeowners always think they're painters. But let me tell you something. A rookie painter is not the same as a professional painter, no matter what you think. I mean, a professional painter, they spend more time prepping the work than they do actually applying the paint. Okay? A professional painters caulk, sand, touch up, spackle, fix items, etc., prior to putting the paint on, okay? And you'll find that typically homeowners just sort of put the paint on and wish for the best, okay? But and typically the colors matter, which colors and exposure to the sun, etc. But typically an interior paint job lasts 5 to 10 years, depending on where and how much, if it's in a room where the kids run through a lot, you're going to find that the fingerprints are on the walls more often and it wears out more. If it's where pets are at, it might be scratched up and stuff like that, okay? But in general, it's 5 to 10 years, right? Here's one of my favorites, appliances. Appliances. Let me tell you something. I was really kind of surprised on this one. Appliances really last 10 to 12 years. 15 if you push it. And the reason that surprised me, I kind of always thought when you bought an appliance it lasts for like 30 years or something like that. That's not true. And again, it depends on usage, If your family happens to be the kind of family that cooks a lot of meals, that's going to be a factor. Washes a lot of dishes, stores a lot of items in the refrigerator, has 7 occupants instead of 2 occupants. What does that mean? That means that there's 5 more people going in and out of the refrigerator all the time. Okay, open the door, close the door, open the door, close the door. The hinges wore out and stuff like that. But in general, you should always kind of research the life expectancy of what type of product, because there's different finishes too. Now we got the stainless steel finishes, we got porcelain finishes, and in some cases we got wood finishes, and all of those have a different life expectancy. Okay, but in general, appliances last 10 to 15 years. Okay, kitchen cabinets. There's another good one. Well, why is that a good one? Because I have to remodel the kitchens where we spend $3,500, $3,200 on cabinets. Let's say a decent sized kitchen, and I've had other kitchens where we spend $25,000 on the cabinets, $30,000 on the cabinets. Okay, cabinets. There's no, depends if you got a special wood or if you got a plastic laminate, but in general, cabinets last approximately 15 to 20 years. Okay, 15 to 20 years, and what happens after that time? The hinges start to wear out. The wood, if they're wood cabinets, you'll find that the certain areas, certain cabinets are used a lot. The grain is starting to fade there because there's fingerprints on it all the time, on that drawer, on that door, etc. They start to stress under weight. A lot of times I've seen where people they got one cabinet that's full of dishes in china. It's a wall cabinet. It's being hung up there by 4 screws, and it's got a ton of china in it. Then I've seen another cabinet right next to it that's got cotton balls in it and Q-tips and light, salt and pepper shakers and things like that. Okay. So that's a factor also. But in general, kitchen cabinets take a lot of wear and tear in the house. I mean, that's a major part of the house. And they last, no matter what they are, 15 to 20 years on average, okay? Countertops. These are all over the place too, because for years and years we had plastic laminate countertops, okay? Formica, and plastic laminate, okay? Those have the tendency to last 20 years, okay? Now the big thing is marble, polished granite, and stuff like that. They have a life expectancy, ready for this? 50 to 60 years. 2.5, 3 times the life expectancy of plastic laminates. Now, what the plastic laminates, how do they have a shorter life expectancy? They scratch easier, they chip easier, okay? But again, the marble and the polished granite have to be maintained. You just can't be neglectful, okay? But in general, you will find that the plastic laminate. Now, see, the plastic laminate, in order to compete with the marble and the granite industry, now makes countertops that look like polished granite and marble. Okay, and it's kind of similar, but it's not. You can tell pretty easily, but still, they do that to compete, and the price is like a fraction. A plastic laminate typically might be a third or a quarter of what marble or polished granite countertops are. Okay, and I've been around that for microproduct for years and years, and it's one heck of a product. But the marble industry is, like I say, it's nice. It has to be maintained, and it lasts longer. Let's talk about electrical a little bit, okay? Your electrical panel, your main panel in your house, okay? Believe it or not, that has a life expectancy of approximately 50 to 60 years, okay? 50 to 60 years. Now, those change through time. See, when I first started in the industry, I think it was, let me think back. Yeah, when I first started in the industry, it was like a 60 watt panel. A 60 amp panel was a standard panel, 60 amps. Then it went up to 100 amps. Okay? Now, 150 amps is very popular, and 200 amps is even better yet. The larger the panel, the more things it'll handle. See, so as time goes on and history goes on, we come up with computers, we come up with television sets, we come up with stereos, we come up with a lot of things that need more electrical. Back in the old days, there weren't all these items, so they didn't need as much electricity, okay? But the bottom line is, today, your standard electrical panel that's required is 100 amps, and that's been going on since the 60s, okay? So 100 amps. And electrical panels last approximately 60 years, okay? And the only time they're abused is if somebody thinks they're an electrician and they're not, and they start taking them apart to add switches or plugs or stuff like that, and they don't put them back together the way they're supposed to be put back together, okay? Switches last approximately 30 years. A switch, or a plug lasts 30 years. Now plugs are just, you've got certain plugs that are never used, and then you got certain plugs that are used all the time, okay? So, obviously, the more they're used, the faster they're going to wear out, okay? But in general, you'll find that a plug, typically a plug will last you 30 years as long with a switch. The wiring in your house, again, 100 to 120 year life expectancy, especially if it's copper, if you have copper wires. Aluminum wires came into the industry quite a while back. It didn't work out real good, though, because they had to be larger in size to carry the same amount of electricity, and they were more brittle, and they had a tendency to break more easily, okay? But in general, you'll find the majority of your houses are copper, even the ones that are very, very old, okay? And they have a life expectancy of over 100 years. That's crazy. Wood framing. Well, I got to smile about that one because it depends who did it, Hopefully, if a real carpenter did it or somebody was really knowledgeable, wood framing lasts 100 years at least. That's the life expectancy of wood framing. Now, just for the record, I happen to live in a house that is, 1848. That's when my house was built, 1848. So we're talking like 50, 60, 170 years now. 170 years. And you know what? That framing's still good. There's a little sags here. There's like the human body. The back kind of crinkles up maybe a little bit. There's a little bit of, I'll find out if I drop something on the floor, sometimes it rolls over to the edge. You can't see it, but obviously the floor's a little bit out of level now and stuff like that. But wood framing in general lasts about 100 years, unless, again, it's abused. And how does it get abused? It gets abused by other trades a lot. Let's say you hire an electrician to do something. He'll go down there and he'll start drilling holes through the floor joists, making them weaker and not compensating for that, okay? Same thing with heat contractors. If you're changing your heat from hot water to, let's say, gas-forced air, you'll find a heat man might cut some of those joists down there to get his ductwork through, but he doesn't reinforce it. He's not a carpenter, so he doesn't reinforce the wood, okay? But if it's not disturbed, it should last at least 100 years, and if it's maintained, and don't forget to look up in your attic every now and then. It's amazing. I go up in the attics and there are cobwebs there. People, you can tell they haven't been up there in 20 years. Or your crawl space. You can't have a lot of water or dampness in your crawl space, or that framing ain't gonna last that long. It's gonna get impacted by mold and mildew and all the other stuff and weaken itself. So you want the crawl spaces maintained with a sheet of plastic over the dirt. Operable vents to let some air in and out. Same thing with the attic. You want air to get in and out, and you don't want anybody up there abusing it, okay? So, framing, that's like the skeletal system of your house. Very important, okay?
It is very sobering to think that there are jobs that people actually apply for where they abandon their area of comfort and propel themselves into the unscripted face of danger. Each year, police officers, law enforcement agents, and firefighters die in the line of duty. We at the Grant Smith Health Insurance Agency fully support these heroes who protect and serve our society, who risk their lives and jeopardize their safety.
Smoke detectors. I told you this wasn't no special order. Okay, smoke detectors. You know, they're required today, you know, and, you know, that industry has come a long way, too. You know, you have direct wire smoke detectors that don't need any batteries. That's in newer houses, because now, you know, but when they first came out, they're all battery. You know, the majority of them are battery. In my 1848 house, I have battery smoke detectors every place. But you're supposed to have smoke detectors. The smoke detectors are very important. Within 3 feet of any bedroom, or in a bedroom, at stairways, major stairways, and here's the one where it's always broken, within 10 feet of a hot water tank or furnace, especially if it's gas-fired. Gas-fired hot water tanks or furnace needs a smoke detector within 10 feet, okay? But smoke detectors have the tendency to last 5 to 10 years, okay? 5 to 10 years. And you got to change the batteries, don't forget that, you know, to make them work and everything, right? You know, what we typically do is, I have this thing like every Easter, every Easter I change batteries in all my smoke detectors. It's just a standard thing. You know, it may not be on Easter day, but like the day after Easter. But you got to pick a day of the year that you do it, because otherwise, you know, you can find one burns out, one doesn't burn out, it's not working, you don't even know it, and, you know, God forbid you have a fire. You know, these things are very, very valuable. Okay, smoke detectors. A furnace, a gas forced air furnace. Well, that's a good one. You know, I just seen a guy had a furnace in his house, 37 years, a gas forced air furnace, standard efficiency. For years now, we have high efficiency furnace. So for years we had 70% efficient furnace. Then we had 80% efficient furnace. Today we got 95. We have 99% efficiency furnace. And let me tell you, they're worth every buck you pay for them. They cost more, but they're worth it. Save you a lot of gas and a lot of electricity. Okay, but a furnace. I just was in a guy's house, had a standard, you know, 37 years old. It was 37 years old. I seen another guy had to replace his after 8 years. Okay, the average life expectancy of a gas forced air furnace is 15 to 25 years. Average life expectancy, 15 to 25 years. That's really not that long when you think about it. Especially if the house was built in 1943, you know. That was 67, it's 80 years now. I mean, you could be on your third or fourth furnace, at least, all right? If it's a boiler, you know, if you have hot water heat, believe it or not, it lasts longer. It lasts like 40 years is your life expectancy. And again, the reason for that is it's pumping a much more efficient method. It's pumping water as opposed to air. Okay, and you have the pipes are much smaller than the ductwork. Okay, so when it fails, it's easier to detect. Obviously, when there's a leak, as opposed to carbon monoxide leaks, which are invisible. All right, air conditioners. Air conditioners. Okay, the furnace, a gas forced air furnace, 15 to 25 years. Okay, the air conditioner, 7 to 15 years. Why is that? Because it's sitting outside. Because it's sitting outside. I highly recommend, and people think I'm nuts sometimes, in the wintertime, or when you're not using your air conditioner, covered up. You know, they sell these things at any of the builder supply places, the hardware stores, tarps that go over them, you tie them up, and it protects it from the elements. Those things sit out there all winter, snowing, raining, leaves falling inside of them, dirty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So protect your air conditioner, and remember that life expectancy isn't that long, 7 to 15 years. And it's expensive to replace. Okay? Important. That's an important factor. I think that tarp is an important factor. My neighbor, I had a neighbor, his air conditioner's in my driveway, so every time I go by, I see his air conditioner never covered up. I always keep telling him, you got to cover it up, you got to cover it up. He doesn't listen. So finally, for his birthday, I bought him a tarp. You know, he says, boy, I can't believe the difference. He says, yeah, now I take that tarp off in the springtime. He says, it's not full of leaves, and it's not full of bugs, it's not full of all the other stuff, you know. As I told you, I put a tarp on it. You know, that makes sense, doesn't it? You're protecting it when it's not being used. Okay, plumbing. Oh boy, plumbing. Hot water tank. How long does a hot water tank last? Gas fired, let's say. Okay. Actually, depends. Depends where. Now it depends if you're in the city or if you're on a well water. Okay, because well water has a tendency to wear on a hot water tank faster because a lot of times there's sediment in the well water that accumulates inside a tank and needs to be drained, and people don't drain them the way they're supposed to, and that has a tendency to burn them out. Okay, but in general, An average life expectancy of an average gas-forced air, I'm not a gas-forced air, a gas-fired hot water tank, is only 10 years. 10 years. And I believe that to be true. I see it all the time, you know. And, you know, the thing about hot water tanks is it's like painting. Everybody thinks they're a plumber when it comes to, you know, everybody thinks they can paint. Everybody thinks they can put in a hot water tank. You see so many of them not put in properly. They're not vented properly. They don't have the proper connections on them. They don't have the proper gas valves on them, you know. And they don't have the proper pressure relief valve extending it in case it happens to blow up. I always got to share the story with people. This is a true story. I saw a house where a hot water tank failed in a basement because they did not put on a pressure relief valve. It wasn't there at all. It was plugged up. They plugged it instead of extending it to the ground. So when the hot water tank malfunctions or overheats, it blows that water onto the floor. Well, this guy put a plug in his. Guess what? He was sitting in his living room, and the hot water tank blew through the floor and through the roof of his house. So that's the truth. It was in all the magazines and everything. That was 30, 40 years ago. All right? So don't mess around. It's like a bomb in your basement. You got to take care of it, okay? But just keep in mind, it should be professionally installed. Very important. And it has a relatively short life expectancy. You know, sometimes using it more maybe actually extends the life expectancy because you're flushing it out all the time. You know, so if you have a person that lives all by themselves and uses it as opposed to 3 or 4 people in a family using it regularly for showering and everything, it may last longer, all right? But they don't have that long of a life expectancy, okay? And we're talking about plumbing. Fixtures in general. When I say fixtures, I'm talking about the faucets and shower heads and all that type of stuff. It depends. You know, it's a 15 to 20 year life expectancy. There's a great variety of products on the market. Some of them are higher quality than others, you know. But in general, you know, the standard products have been around for years. I don't want to mention any brand names, but they last just about as long as the higher ones are 15 to 20 years. You know, faucets you may have to change washers or something like that, but in general, washers, spigots, the control knobs for shower heads and all that kind of stuff, drains, last 15 to 20 years. Toilets. How long does a toilet last? 50 years. 50 years. Remember I told you I had my house in 1848? I got one of those high flush toilets in one of my bathrooms where you pull a chain and the tank's up on a wall. It's an original flush, okay? I just left it there and it works beautiful. It's noisier than heck, you know. But toilets last up to 50 years unless somebody wants to, you know, they're made out of China, so you can crack them. I've seen them crack, you know, quite easily. Or the mechanism sometimes has to be changed inside. Disposals, the garbage disposal, 18 to 15 years. And why is that? Because it's a lot of times people garbage disposal things they shouldn't be garbage disposaling. You know, I mean, you're supposed to be using vegetation and things that are softer and stuff like that. But I've seen people throw stuff in there that, you know, walnut shells and glass and stuff like that that they shouldn't actually be throwing through there. Basically, the waste lines in your house, you know, all the lines that throw all the sewage out of the house, and they last 50 to 80 years. You know, they used to be cast iron for years. Now they're PVC. The PVC lasts almost indefinitely. Okay, and then copper pipes. There's really I couldn't even find a life expectancy on copper pipes. They last forever. No, there's a whole generation where we used steel pipes, like in the 50s. They converted over to steel, and those were always a problem. That's why we don't use them anymore, because they're steel. They rust inside, and as they rust, they start to restrict water. You know, and then they restrict water, and they start to leak at the joints. All the joints are like, you know, they're steel. They screw joints together as opposed to soldering them. All right, so steel pipes have a shorter life expectancy, probably 25 years. Copper, there is no life expectancy on them. Okay, copper is the best, but it's also now they're using PEX. That's that plastic stuff. Okay, and we don't have a life expectancy on that yet, but it's one of those products that I really kind of thought was a crummy product, but it might not be. All right, because I haven't found one yet that leaks, and it's been out probably for 10 years or so that I'm aware of. All right, so today they use plastic. Copper was the biggie, but copper got so expensive, and then there was steel, which is not desirable. Okay, flooring. Oh, flooring is really interesting. Okay, hardwood flooring, the old-fashioned hardwood flooring that a lot of people don't put in today because it's quite expensive. 80 to 100 year life expectancy if maintained. In my house, 1848, I have wood flooring that's in there since 1885. Okay, 123 years already. And it looks like $1 million, but I maintain it. I keep it clean. I had it resanded. I had it resealed, you know. But hardwood flooring, if maintained, 80 to 100 years. Okay. Then, of course, we went to carpet. Carpet, 5 to 15 years. from 80 to 100 to 5 to 15. I like carpet though. I mean, I think you should. I like it. There's so many different varieties of carpeting, but it depends on where, animals, maintenance, how often you clean it, how often you vacuum it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Ceramic tile. It's almost like carpeting, 75 to 100. Okay. Hardwood was 80 to 100. Ceramic 75 to 100 years life expectancy. And again, it's maintained. Ceramic tile. I mean, if the grouting has to be kept clean. If the grouting comes out, you have to take care of it. Okay. But in general, I mean, it has to be maintained. But if it's maintained, it lasts indefinitely. Okay. Ceramic's real high. Hardwood's real high. Carpet's real short. And then now we have LVT. That's that artificial wood type. Okay. LVT is very attractive, very pretty, but it has a life expectancy of 15 to 25 years. 15 to 25. All right. And the one that was before that was the wood type, the wood grain. We had the kind that came out the planks a few years ago and it snaps together and it looks like LVT, but it's actually wood layers. That stuff it has a problem. If you spill water on it, it warps, I don't even have a life expectancy on that. Basically, carpet 5 to 15, hardwood 80 to 100, ceramic 75 to 100, and LVT 10 to 25. LVT is nice, it's plastic-like, okay? And finally, drywall or plaster. Oh, that's interesting. Plaster is 50 to 100 years, 50 to 100. Drywall is 40 to 70, okay? And again, it depends on maintenance, how well you paint it, how well you caulk it, how well you abuse it, what do you punch into it, what do you hang on it, do you hang big nails or little nails, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? So that's it. I gave you all the things for exterior life expectancies and now all the interior. And you sit there and analyze it. And I think about it in my house all the time about the different stuff. And is it ready to replace? Looks like it's ready. Maybe it's not. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? That's it. This is Mitch Kuffa for Homework. And this program was presented by Blue Water Healthy Living, sponsored by the Grand Smith Health Insurance Agency, and produced by GBS Media. See you guys next time.